Everyone assumed she was just another customer with a fancy card, but in reality, she was the CEO about to close a $4.5 billion deal, a quiet, upscale restaurant tucked into the heart of the financial district. Its walls were lined with marble chandeliers sparkled above linen-covered tables, and the air carried the faint aroma of truffle butter and expensive wine. To anyone walking in, this was simply a place where wealthy professionals came to celebrate success. But on that night, a single table near the center would witness something no one expected, a moment where dignity, pride, and billions of dollars collided in the most public way possible. She walked in with the kind of quiet confidence that comes only from decades of hard work, resilience, and undeniable brilliance. Her name was Ava Morgan, a black woman whose rise, from modest beginnings to one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, was already legendary in certain circles. She wasn't flashy, didn't need cameras to validate her worth, and carried herself with the effortless poise of someone who had nothing to prove, or at least shouldn't have had to prove anything anymore. But that night would remind everyone, watching that even power, success, and influence don't always shield black excellence from prejudice. Ava was finalizing a monumental deal that would not only expand her company's global footprint, but also bring opportunities to thousands of employees. The stakes were enormous. $4.5 billion on the line, executives from across the world gathering to celebrate, and Ava positioned at the center of it all. The deal was already signed in principle, but this dinner was the final symbolic step, a gathering to cement trust and close the partnership with warmth and respect. It was supposed to be a night of triumph. But as Ava reached for her black card, the kind of card reserved for only the highest net worth individuals, whispered about in financial circles as a symbol of ultimate privilege, a silence fell over the table. The restaurant manager, a white man in his early 40s with a stiff posture and a patronizing smile, picked up the card and froze. His eyes narrowed, then flicked up at her face with a look she had seen too many times before. He hesitated, and then, in a tone dripping with suspicion, he said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, we can't run this card." The words landed like a slap in the middle of the celebration. Her business partners, mostly white men in suits, looked confused, their brows furrowed as they exchanged uneasy glances. Ava stayed calm, her face unreadable, but her silence spoke volumes. She had been here before, not in this restaurant, not on this night, but in this same moment. That same script, playing out again and again, someone looking at her and deciding, without reason, that she couldn't possibly belong. The manager continued, his voice louder now as though he wanted the surrounding tables to hear. "We've had issues before, and this type of card can sometimes be problematic. Do you perhaps have another form of payment?" The audacity. He didn't check the machine. He didn't even swipe it. He looked at the card, then looked at her, and decided. He had already written the ending. Unbeknownst to him, Ava wasn't just any customer. She wasn't just holding a black card. She was the CEO of the very company whose partnership would determine whether his restaurant chain survived the next decade. The $4.5 billion deal her team was finalizing that night included hospitality partnerships. This restaurant was on the list, and with a single word, she had the power to change the fate of every person employed there. Her guests shifted uncomfortably, one of them whispering, "Maybe it's a mistake." Another leaned forward, whispering in Ava's ear, "Do you want me to handle this?" Ava raised a hand slightly, a graceful signal for silence. She didn't need anyone to step in. She had fought her way up boardrooms where she was the only black woman in the room, endured years of assumptions that her success was accidental, and survived patronizing tones and dismissive glances. She knew exactly how to handle this moment. Her calm unnerved the manager, who began tapping the card against his palm impatiently. He smirked slightly, as though he was proving a point not only to her, but to the entire room. Patrons nearby turned their heads, sensing the tension, their eyes darting between the manager and Ava like spectators at a theater they hadn't paid to see. Finally, Ava leaned back in her chair, her voice smooth and deliberate. "You're refusing to run my card?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his chin tilted upward. "We just can't process it. Company policy." She studied him for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. And then, with the same composure she used in billion-dollar boardrooms, Ava gave a slight smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Very well," she said. "Then allow me to save us both some time. That deal we were here to celebrate, consider it canceled, effective immediately." The table gasped. Forks clattered against plates. The manager blinked, his smug expression evaporating as if someone had pulled a curtain away from his face. "Excuse me?" he stammered. Ava stood slowly, smoothing her blazer with steady hands. She looked him directly in the eye, her gaze sharp enough to cut through his arrogance. "You judged me the moment you saw me, and because of that, your company just lost $4.5 billion. The ripple of shock spread through the restaurant like wildfire. Her guests scrambled to their feet, some protesting, while others were simply stunned into silence. The manager's face turned pale as he realized what had just slipped through his fingers. But Ava wasn't finished. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low but carrying enough weight for everyone nearby to hear. "This isn't about a card. This is about dignity, about the cost of disrespect, and tonight you've just learned how expensive that cost can be." She gathered her things with unshakable poise, her guests following suit as they filed out one by one. The entire room seemed to part like the Red Sea, diners whispering in hushed tones, some looking at her with admiration, others with shame. The manager stood frozen, the black card still in his hand, the reality of what he had done finally sinking in. For him, it had been just another night, just another assumption, just another judgment. For Ava, it had been another reminder of the invisible battles she had fought her entire life. And won. What he didn't realize yet was that the consequences of that night would stretch far beyond the walls of that restaurant. Ava had the power not only to cancel a deal, but also to reshape an entire industry. And she intended to make sure that no one, no company, no manager, no institution would forget the cost of disrespecting her or anyone who looked like her ever again. The morning after the incident, headlines lit up the financial world like a wildfire. What had begun as a humiliating moment in a restaurant was now a global story of dignity, power, and justice. Black CEO cancels $4.5 billion deal. Over discrimination. Ava Morgan teaches corporate America the true cost of bias. Restaurant chain in crisis after CEO's public stand. Every headline carried the weight of Ava's choice. What most people didn't know was that Ava hadn't called a single journalist. She hadn't given a press statement, hadn't tweeted a single word. The story spread because those who had witnessed it couldn't stay silent. Executives who dined at the table shared the account in hushed tones that quickly leaked to the media. Diners who filmed parts of the confrontation posted them online, and within hours, millions of people were replaying the moment Ava stood tall and said, "Consider it canceled." The restaurant's parent company scrambled to control the damage. Their stock prices wavered. Shareholders demanded explanations, and as the pressure mounted, the manager's smug dismissal transformed into a very public liability. But for Ava, this wasn't just about one man or one restaurant. It was about a lifetime of moments just like that. Times when she was followed in stores, doubted in meetings, interrupted when she spoke, second-guessed in boardrooms. Each insult, each dismissal, each indignity stacked up into a mountain of memories that she carried with her, even as she climbed to the very top of the corporate world. At a press conference held 2 days later, Ava stood behind a podium, her posture impeccable, her expression calm yet resolute. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward. And in her first public words on the matter, she delivered a message that would echo for years. "I did not cancel a deal because of one man's ignorance," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I canceled it because I refuse to reward a system that allows dignity to be treated as optional. Disrespect, when tolerated, becomes policy. And I will not invest billions into companies that choose to overlook it." The room erupted in murmurs, some reporters nodding in agreement, others scrambling to jot down every word. Ava continued, "I want every young black boy and girl watching this to know your worth is not up for debate. You do not have to shrink. Apologize for yourself, or hand over your dignity to be accepted. If someone cannot see your value, it is their loss, not yours." Those words were replayed across every major network, quoted in newspapers, and shared endlessly on social media. Hashtags began trending: "Ca cost of disrespect," "Ha Black Excellence," "Ha Ava Morgan." People posted their own stories of being doubted, dismissed, and disrespected, turning Ava's moment into a larger movement. She hadn't just canceled a deal. She had ignited a conversation about the hidden costs of prejudice in business, in everyday life, in every corner of society. Behind closed doors, Ava met with her board. Some were nervous. $4.5 billion was not a small figure, and even with Ava's influence, walking away from such a deal was monumental. "Are you certain about this, Ava?" one of them asked cautiously. "This partnership was supposed to take us into new markets. The numbers don't lie." Ava leaned forward, her eyes scanning the faces around the table. "Numbers don't lie, but neither does dignity. If we build partnerships that compromise who we are, then every dollar we make is already poisoned. And I will not poison this company." Silence followed, the kind of silence that signaled not doubt, but respect. The board members realized that Ava wasn't just protecting her own dignity, she was protecting theirs too. She was setting a standard that money could not outweigh humanity. Meanwhile, the restaurant chain's CEO issued a public apology, calling the incident a terrible misunderstanding. But the words rang hollow. The world had seen the video. They had heard the tone in the manager's voice, seen the smirk on his face, and watched Ava rise above it with grace. There was no misunderstanding, only a mirror held up to the ugliness that too often hid in plain sight. As the weeks passed, Ava redirected the $4.5 billion deal into partnerships with companies that had proven track records of equity, diversity, and respect. Black-owned businesses received unprecedented opportunities. Women-led startups found doors opening that had once been sealed shut. Communities that had long been ignored by corporate giants suddenly found themselves at the center of new investments. Ava hadn't just canceled a deal, she had rewritten the rules of who gets to benefit when power changes hands. And as for the restaurant chain, they faced lawsuits, boycotts, and declining sales. The manager was quietly dismissed, but the damage was done. Their name became synonymous with the very bias Ava had exposed, and no amount of rebranding could erase the stain of that night. Months later, Ava returned to that same city for another business dinner. Not at the restaurant that had doubted her, but at a Black-owned establishment whose walls were filled with art celebrating heritage and pride. As she sat surrounded by her team, laughter echoing and glasses clinking, a young server approached her table nervously. "Ms. Morgan," the server said, voice trembling, "I just want to thank you. What you did, it showed me that people like us don't have to take disrespect just to survive. You gave us all a little more courage." Ava smiled, her eyes softening. "You don't need me to give you courage," she replied. "It's already in you. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." The server walked away with tears in their eyes, and Ava turned back to her table, her heart full. She hadn't planned to become a symbol. She hadn't set out to make headlines. All she wanted was to live in a world where her worth was recognized without question. But if her actions had lit a fire in others, if her stand had given even one more person the courage to demand respect, then it was worth every dollar she had walked away from. The truth was simple but powerful. Ava Morgan didn't lose 4.5 billion that night. She invested it in dignity, in justice, in the future of people who looked like her. And that return would last far longer than any contract, any deal, any fleeting number on a balance sheet. Because sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is prove, without apology, that respect is priceless.